Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Life's Legends, the podcast where we talk about the stories that have shaped our lives. Today, I have a very special guest on the podcast, my own mother. Say hello.
Hello,
So,
Mother.
Mom, what's the story that you've picked for us to go through this month of September?
Well, I'm so glad you asked, Luke. By the way, you're a terrific son.
Oh, thanks.
Here's what I've
She's
chosen.
lying for the podcast.
No, I'm not. I have chosen Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie. I'm not sure that's how you say his last name.
I was just going to say, do you know?
Barrie?
Yeah.
Barrie. He's English, so I don't know if that helps us. We'll say J.M. Barrie.
Okay.
How about that?
Okay. Do we have to say it that way every time?
Every time.
Okay, great. Great. So we're, because I like to shake things up all the time. This month we're going to record this in a little different way than we have in the past. We're simply going to split it up into this first episode. We're going to spend all the episode talking about the story. So ordinarily I'd ask you some questions about yourself and your experience with stories, but we're going to save that for episode 2, and instead we're just going to jump right into the story of Peter Pan. In this episode, we're just going to focus on the story. But before we get into that, I like to ask my guests when they come on if they have any shout outs of other stories that they want to have all 7 listeners of the Life's Legends podcast hear about. So do you have a story that you'd like to shout out?
Well, because it was written in the same time period and along the same imagination type of lines, I'm giving a shout out to Through the Looking Glass by Lewis Carroll.
Okay, great.
AKA Alice in Wonderland.
Right, that's what probably most people would know it from. Also, was a early novel that was turned into a Disney movie.
Yes.
Early on, so they share that similarity as well.
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, great. That was a great shout out.
You know what? It took me forever to think about it.
That's great. So let's get into the story. So I normally start with characters, but if you want to start somewhere else, you can. But normally I try to go over the characters that are prevalent in the story and kind of our thoughts about them and what they think. Is there a character that you'd like to start with, a place you would like to begin the discussion?
Well, my favorite character throughout the
Wow,
years.
you're just gonna favorite character right off the bat. Okay.
Well, you asked for a character.
No, that's
has been
fine.
Wendy.
Okay.
I've been a Wendy fan my whole life.
Okay.
Yeah. She's the opposite of me in many ways.
I was gonna say I don't know that I find that many similarities between you and Wendy.
We're not similar at all. We're opposite.
Mm-hmm.
But in that way, she's intriguing to me.
Sure.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, you want more than that?
Yeah, I would love more.
Oh,
than that.
okay.
I mean, if you have more.
Well, I find it interesting that Wendy is such a responsible young lady at such a young age, and how she just kind of embraces the thought of that time period that a woman is expected to be motherly and take care of the nurturing of the children, and that's her primary role and only role. And I just find it interesting that at such a young age. But I also think that that's tied into the fact that she is the oldest child, and sometimes the oldest child does feel the most responsible.
Yeah. Yeah, she's the oldest child of what seems like a very practical / traditional English family.
Yes.
The Darlings seem very almost unemotional at times, especially Mr. Darling in the beginning. Seems unemotional.
Well,
but,
a British home is run with precision.
and now we're going to another Disney movie.
But it does speak to that time period.
Sure.
You know, it is
Sure.
an age in England where that is, that's kind of the way the households are set up.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. To stick with Wendy, one of the things that I find is interesting, I agree with you that I think that she embraces the responsibility aspect of adulthood very early in the book. She kind of always has this responsibility level going on, and again, there's probably a little bit of oldest child there. Yet, she's not entirely responsible. And Barry, how are we saying Barry? Is that what we're calling him?
Yeah, let's call him Barry.
Barry, our boy, the author, seems to point out several times where she deliberately makes the irresponsible decision. And all of those times revolve around Peter and making decisions concerning Peter that she deliberately makes a decision that's not that responsibility decision. So while, yeah, she is definitely this kind of motherhood and responsibility mindset she hasn't entirely kind of thrown off this childhood recklessness, because she does go out the window. She does go with him.
Yeah, she's still drawn to... I think she's drawn to Peter because he is so haphazard and exciting and different than her. It's another, I'm drawn to the opposite of who I am. But yeah, she's still a child, so she's still going to be, enticed by childhood things and adventures and mermaids. That was the thing that really interested her the most. These are things that she's never seen, that she wants to see, that she wants to experience. But in the end, even in the adventures that get a little out of hand, she is the one who brings it all back around. Yeah. Everybody needs to get to bed.
Everybody needs to be in bed.
Right. So she's still, in the end, the responsible one out of any of them.
Yeah. Oh, for sure she is definitely responsible. I think that it's interesting to me that she hasn't she is, because in reality she is still a child, so she has not actually escaped those childhood tendencies of throwing off that responsibility when that draws her in.
I would argue that she never did. Even in the end, as a grown-up, she allowed her daughter to fly out the window with Peter Pan, knowingly. She knew it was coming.
Sure.
She knew it was going to happen, and out she went.
I don't know that she knew it was coming, but...
Oh, she knew it was coming.
I don't know that she knew Peter Pan was ever coming back. I think she forgot that he was real.
I think she knew that he was coming back.
But here's my other... and I thought about this because I'm like... because this was such a big deal originally with Mrs. Darling. Like, this is like... the flight, the three boys, or the three children leaving, is such a massive tragedy to to all members of that household, including the dog.
More so him. More so Mr. Darling.
I don't think more so. I think they
climbed in the kennel.
I mean, it was a crazy response.
She didn't climb in the kennel.
She didn't climb in the kennel, but I think they're handling it in different ways. And I think the book... See, now we're jumping all the way ahead.
It changed him. But I don't think it changed her.
No.
But it changed him.
I'll agree with you there. It changed Mr. Darling, but it didn't change Mrs. Darling. But I think that this betrays, then, the fact that Mrs. Darling cared deeply about them from the start.
Yes.
And I think even Barry, adds in that last... or second to last chapter, whenever they come back, he adds in these moments where she says something like, "Are you just doing this for the attention?" And then she takes it back right away, which I think is actually a really interesting thing to put in the book, because it's very human and it's something you would ask.
Well, yeah,
it's you get that, and then he says something too about closing the window or something, and then he takes it right back again.
Right.
So they're both it's showing to me what that communicated was, these are two people that are grieving, and they're grieving differently. They're grieving drastically differently for what happened, but they are grieving the same.
Yes.
They have the same level.
Well,
and I agree with you that Mr. Darling has come to that conclusion instead of where Mrs. Darling might have started there. But all the way back to Wendy, I think that Wendy has less to be concerned about than Mrs. Darling had when they left. Because when they left, Mrs. Darling has no idea what's going to happen. She has no idea where they are. She has nothing to go on. Wendy has a very good idea of where Jane has gone, of what's going on. This was the spring cleaning thing. That was the deal that Mrs. Darling set up with Peter at the end. And so she knows that Jane's going to come back. So it's different there is still a little bit of this, like, I will let her go and experience this. But it's different than Mrs. Darling, who is abjectly terrified that her children will never return. Whereas Wendy's like, she will be back, and this will happen again to her. And even the story, I think, ends with, like, and then it happened to the granddaughter, and then and so on.
But if you were truly able to leave behind all childhood things, you would not let your daughter fly out the window. You would say, that's ridiculous. You're not doing that. We're going to be sensible people here in this British home, and we are going to stay here and do what we do.
Sure, I suppose. But then I suppose, doesn't that betray that Wendy is not all responsible? That Wendy is the middle ground between these two things that are pulling us in different directions of that responsibility of adulthood and the adventurousness of childhood. Youth.
Yes, but that's my point, is that she never actually fully grew up.
Yeah. Well, she still tells us stories.
Absolutely.
And so she never fully grows up. And she is a very interesting character in that way, and I would argue is the main character. At minimum, she shares that title. If not, she is the main character, and it's not Peter.
Wow, that's an argument to make.
Well, I don't think Peter... Yeah. I stand by that. I think that Wendy is... First of all, this novel was originally called Peter and Wendy, so...
Right.
I think that by taking her out of the title, we've kind of gypped her of her rightful spot.
Yes.
But... even saying that, I think that Wendy is much more important to the story than
Wendy. Yeah, you're right. Wendy
than
is
any other character other than Peter
to the story. I would say yes. I would agree with you. Wendy is central to the story, as much so as Peter. Yeah. Okay, I see where you're going with that.
Well, that was good. We've kind of touched on the Darlings a little bit, so we'll go there first. Because I do have things to say about Mr. and Mrs. Darling, and I'll start with Mr. Darling. First of all, the kennel thing is bonkers, but we don't have to start there. Because it starts crazy already in the beginning, in the very first chapter.
So when he's like, how many children can we keep? Are we going to be able to keep these?
He's counting. He's counting, right? He's counting the...
How many children can we afford?
Right. And he's like, but like when she's pregnant with Wendy, he's like the first one. He's like doing the math to see it.
Can we keep this one?
His question is, can we keep it?
Yeah.
My question when I read that was, what is your alternative? Like, are you going to give her away somewhere?
Dump it in the Thames, I guess. I don't know.
Yes. Yeah, but that's so he is incredibly practical and not. You want to talk about that theme of responsibility of adulthood being like epitomized by someone. It's epitomized by him. And when we get to the second episode, there's some interesting things about the origins of this story with him that are kind of interesting, but we're not there yet. But then, so this is this like super serious, super practical guy who's like, we don't even have to have, like, we might have to give these kids up if they cost us too much money, and then they leave, and then they are whisked away, and we see how devastated he is by like getting in this kennel,
right?
Which kind of takes a weird turn as he becomes like a local celebrity.
Right. Well, I think he crawled in the kennel because they were missing, but also feeling the guilt over how he treated Nana.
Right. Yeah, because if Nana was there, this would not have happened.
Correct.
If
and
he
put
didn't
her out.
overreact, this wouldn't have happened. So
right.
Now this is his penance. This is his cross that he's going to carry.
Yeah. A lot of guilt.
Yeah.
He's feeling a lot of guilt.
Right, and that's... Yeah. I don't know quite what else to say about him.
Well, he did. I like the transformation in him from the beginning to the end of just this very uncaring, unemotional man to now I'm so emotional that I'm crawling into a kennel and living out my life this way.
Right.
And also then when the children return, his joy and his excitement over that, where these children at the beginning, he was so unemotional that he was like, well, we might have to get rid of some of them.
Yeah, and you can actually see that sentimentality, or lack thereof, ooze into John, because there's a lot of points in this story where John will say something, and I'm like, John, are you okay? Are you all right? Like, he'll say something like, yeah, let's murder him, and I'm like, okay, John, I think maybe you need to have feelings sometimes, but I think that like, and as he's the firstborn son, he's old enough to start mirroring his father, and so he's gonna start, whereas Michael isn't. Michael was too young, and we see that because he starts to forget even what his parents look like.
Right.
But all of that to say, back to Mr. Darling, the biggest, like, the clearest, like, this is a different man than we saw at the beginning, is we are counting the coins to make sure we can have Wendy, keep Wendy, and we have adopted all of the Lost Boys. They
Correct.
all live there now.
Yes.
And that wasn't even, and I love that they were like, he was a little perturbed, but not because he had to adopt them, but because they didn't think it was like, he was like, his position was usurped. They didn't ask him. Like, they didn't, they didn't, like, kind of come to him with it first.
Which would have been a big deal in that day and time. You need to present the man of the house with any changes, any updates, anything of an idea that you might have that needed to run through the man of the house first.
Right.
And it did not.
No, yeah, but like, and then the boys like immediately do that, and like in like this funny way. But he's immediately acquiesces to it,
right?
Which you never do. He would never do in any, like, before this event.
Right.
If those boys showed up while his 3 kids are there, there's no way he's taking them.
No, which he showed at the beginning when he put Nana out. Because even when it said, when he was putting Nana out, he knew that it wasn't the right thing to do. Like, he knew that he was overreacting to the situation, but because of his pride, he did it anyway.
Yeah.
So then in the end, like you're saying, he would have never acquiesced because, if it was the beginning of the story, who he used to be, because of his pride. But it seems like that. I mean, and to be fair, living in a kennel for that long probably does wipe away some of your pride.
Sure. Well, I would, yeah. And then to become, like, nationally recognized as kennel guy, I do think that would, maybe make you more humble as you entered a Giant Eagle.
Right.
But which is a Western PA shopping market. I just realized that probably not everybody knows what that is.
No.
Yeah, but we have spent too much time talking about Mr. Darling. Mrs. Darling, do you have things to say about Mrs. Darling? I don't have a lot to say.
I don't have a lot to say.
She seems just like
a loving mother.
Yes,
she's a loving mother.
That's what she is.
Yeah, and she doesn't. There's not a lot of transformation in her. So, I would rather talk about characters that have transformation.
Sure.
So, Mrs. Darling is kind of a boring character to me that I could take or leave.
Okay, all right, that's interesting. All I'll say is I like in the beginning when they talk about like why Mr. Darling and Mrs. Darling are like. They explain some of this background of them, and there's something like enchanting about Mrs. Darling that like was unavoidable, and like it was just so happened that Mr. Darling like got there first is like what they said,
right?
Like proposed first or something, and like so there's something, and then the like weird like there's this kiss that is unattainable. I didn't quite get it. I don't know if you got it, but it's like there's something like mysteriously enchanting about her in the beginning.
Right.
And
but somehow Mr. Darling just squishes that out of her.
Yeah, right, but yeah, and it like leaves over time. But yeah. But that thing, whatever that that thing is, I think then affects Peter later. All the way at the end, it's this like her like her goodness, the genuine good motherhood that she displays begins to like affect him a little at the end.
Yeah, but I don't think that has anything to do with her enchantedness. But we'll talk about that in number 2.
Okay, all right. Now I'm interested. Okay. I don't have anything else to say about Mrs. Darling.
Yeah, Mrs. Darling. I mean, she needed to be there because she was representative of a mother who actually cared.
She's the real mother
Correct.
in this story.
Yes.
Not Wendy.
Right.
Um,
And she was the example to Wendy of who to,
Right. Emulate.
basically show the Lost Boys this is what a mother
right.
does and looks like and cares. Cares like. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
So in that way, she's important because she was Wendy's example.
Sure. Yeah.
And I would argue in the end, she's very important because it opens Peter's eyes to the fact that a mother can be good and loving.
Yeah. Sure.
But there's a lot behind that.
Is that what you're alluding to on episode 2?
Yes,
okay,
episode
we'll
2.
move on.
Stay tuned.
What character? Move us along. What character are we talking about now? Where are we going?
Let's go with Captain Hook because I find him fascinating.
Let me tell you, that's my favorite character.
He's my second favorite.
Yeah, that's my favorite character of this whole thing is Captain Hook. What do you find fascinating about Captain Hook?
Oh, what do I find? The thing I love most about Captain Hook is good form. I love
What a chapter!
I
Anyway.
love that no matter what, he needs to have good form.
Yeah.
Although I would argue he abandons that a number of times
Several. Yeah.
throughout the story. But in the back of his mind is so important, good form.
Sure. Do you... First of all, they mentioned that, like, he went to, like, some prodigious university. Is that a... Like, do you have any idea about that? Because, like, it felt like Barry was referencing something I was supposed to know as a 1911 Englishman that I don't know. And maybe it's, like... I don't know. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's just that he was some kind of, like... Yeah, I like the good form thing.
Yeah, I mean, again, number 2 episode, but I believe that Captain Hook is the representative of the author's father in real life.
Oh.
And so
Well, that
he
makes
could have
sense.
gone to a
Yeah.
prestigious university, his father.
Oh.
He could have, because he came from a wealthy family.
Now you're getting into medium. What are you doing?
Okay, but you asked me. You asked me.
Okay.
Why
Okay,
did
so you think this is an inside thing that Barry is like?
Oh, he's totally writing out his life feelings. That's what's happening in this book. His experiences in
yeah.
life and his feelings. And I believe that's a representative of his father, kind of off doing his own thing, but good form.
Good form.
Good form.
Yeah, is Captain Hook brave or cowardly?
I would argue that he's both.
Okay, yeah, I would too.
Obviously cowardly, and rightly so over the crocodile.
Sure.
But
This crocodile, by the way, is the scariest thing in this world. Like, there were some freaky
Yeah.
things in the Neverland, but that crocodile is persistent.
Yes, well, he got a taste of Hook, and Hook's blood was a different color, and so it would be probably a different flavor. And I think that as a result, the crocodile got a taste of his blood, and it was like none other. And so he's got to keep pursuing this
Yeah, he's gotta eat that.
Captain Hook, and he's got to have him.
Gotta eat him.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also think he's not. Here's why I asked that is because if you're familiar, I know you're familiar, but if anyone is familiar with the Disney movie Peter Pan,
Yeah.
he only seems cowardly to me in the Disney movie. I don't think he never. So when I was a kid, like growing up and seeing this movie, I never thought he was brave. I always thought he was a coward.
Well, that's
maybe that's
because
because
they couldn't show him
repeatedly call him
taking
a
his
codfish,
hook
but-
and ripping people to shreds. In the book, this is what he's
Yeah.
doing. He's taking his
but
hook
that
and
doesn't-
ripping people to
That
shreds.
doesn't indicate bravery. That can also
Well-
indicate cowardice. It like
True.
like that doesn't necessarily. I think what indicates bravery about him is the various times that he is willing to confront all danger other than this crocodile. This crocodile is the only thing he will back away from.
Right.
And in
But
fact, he
I'm
gets-
saying Disney didn't present him that way. If Disney
Sure,
would
he
have
can
presented
only be
him
so cruel.
in more of an ominous type
Right.
character, that would have been different. But
Yeah, he can only be so cool. And I think it was really cool that, like, they build up this like the legends of like real pirates that he's killed and
Yes.
like he has like some kind of place in the like the great age of piracy, like,
Right.
that
He's a big
really
deal.
happened in
Yeah.
real life, but has now like gone to the Neverland, like, somehow.
He's a big deal. I think Disney did his character a disservice.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That is the biggest problem I now have with the
Yeah.
Disney movie, is because I did not, he's nowhere near any, like, my top 5 favorite Disney villains.
But I would say, if you ever saw the movie Hook with Robin Williams,
Yeah.
I feel like they did his character a little better. Still not quite as
Well, they can
brave,
do a little more, right?
but
can
they
do
did
a
his
little more of
good
the
form
cruelty.
perfectly.
Yeah, the good form was good. Yes. That movie, by the way, is good. You know what? That's my shout out. Is the movie, the Robin Williams movie Hook.
Yeah, it's a good movie.
That's a really good movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really like Hook. I think he is a great villain for this.
Yes, I would agree.
For the duo that we have.
He said the only thing he shied away from was the sight of his own blood. Or was that Peter?
I'm not sure.
No, it's talking about Captain Hook.
I believe that.
Yes, and I love this phrase. He was never more sinister than when he was most polite.
Yeah. Well, that's true.
I love that.
So this is a thing that I don't know if you know this about, and this is, I'm gonna get a little meta, but
Oh yeah.
this is a thing about stories and villains in particular. When you look at villains of different stories and you look at how villains are portrayed, one of the most sinister things you can do with a tyrant or a monster is to make them excessively polite, because now it scares me, because what I know about them. What you have to do is you have to introduce me to this person, and they have to, like, either look intimidating, or you have to immediately show me that they're intimidating, like have him rip a guy apart with a hook, you know?
Yeah.
And then he always acts polite, and so the whole time, as the reader, as the audience, I'm thinking at any point this man could rip someone apart with his hook. But I have no clue when, because he's being so overly polite,
Right.
that I don't know when that will shift. And
Yeah.
he, several times in the story, shifts. And then other times you think he's going to do it, and he doesn't. Like when Smee and the other guy are like, yeah, oh, we set her free, boss, when they're in that cave. And you think, like, oh, these two are dead. But he doesn't spend any time thinking about that.
Right.
He goes after Peter.
Right.
He goes after the voice that's in the cave. And so, like, sometimes you're like, he's smarter than just blatantly cruel. He is cruel, but he's not cruel for cruelty's sake all the time.
No.
But that veneer of politeness is truly like a coat over what is who he really is. And that's, I think, because of this idea of good form. This, like, thing, he must present himself well.
Yeah, he dresses well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He must present himself well in that way. And in his last fight with Peter, this is the thing. He knows he's going to die. He knows he's going to lose, but he must get Peter to step out of line. He has to get Peter to display bad form, even if he just dies. Because then there's he can hold on to some facet of it and say, well, at least he had bad form at the end. Which is ironic, because that is maybe the thing Peter cares about the least in the whole world.
Right, he doesn't care about good form.
No.
Because Peter's a child. He doesn't care about good form.
Right.
He doesn't understand. He probably doesn't even fully understand good form.
No. You know, and I'm going to be honest, I don't know that I fully understand good form.
Well, that's because you're not British.
That might be true. That might be unfortunately true.
You're American. Americans don't have good form.
No, we have pretty bad form across the board. Our
But
form.
but the British, they have good form.
I can tell you're a fan of The Crown.
I am.
But
Fascinating.
yeah. Yeah. Hook is great. Did you have more Hook thoughts, or should we move on?
We can move on. Yeah, we can move on.
Yeah. Because I have more Hook thoughts, but I'll save
We
them
can
for
share
the
them. Okay.
No, they're for the second episode. Well, let's stop dancing around Peter and just talk about Peter.
All right.
What do you think about Peter? What did you think about Peter in this book? I think that he's very similar to the movie in some ways, but he's got some distinct differences.
Oh yeah, he's definitely much more impulsive in this book, much more aggressive in this book.
Definitely.
I mean, he doesn't mind killing people. It's kind
No.
of what he finds that adventurous and fun.
Yeah.
So these are his adventures. People usually die. In fact, I think there's one part of the book
Yeah.
where they're like, and sometimes they found a body after an adventure, and sometimes they did not find the body.
Right,
I'm
yeah.
like, he's just killing people.
But it's like, yeah, and it's kind of worded as like a, sometimes the guy
Yeah.
died and sometimes
Sometimes-
he didn't die.
Right. So I think,
Stabbings are hard to tell.
yeah, I think it's just, I think in the movie they did portray him as impulsive and childlike and just here, there, and everywhere, but not to the point where his adventures would be sinister almost.
Right, well, they took the massive consequences out, right? That, like, or maybe not consequences might be the wrong word, but they took this, like, oh no, he's killing people. Like,
Right.
the scary aspect, which is the frightening aspect
Right.
of this life in the Neverland.
Yes.
Which is that it is extremely violent all
Yes.
the time.
Yeah.
And even like the first time we're in the Neverland, we're like brought into this scene of like the Lost Boys chasing the beasts or something, and the pirates
In a
chasing the
circle,
Lost
yeah.
Boys, and the we're gonna call them natives chasing the pirates. And then the beasts are chasing like it's like a circle of
Yes.
like these different groups trying to kill the other groups.
Absolutely. It's very violent. And it's also quite creepy at night.
Oh, this is not a place you want to be at night.
No. I mean, the whole Mermaid Lagoon turning into some kind of what at night? Like, that's creepy. What's going on with those mermaids in that lagoon at night? I don't even know. So, it's just definitely not... I think in Disney they portray Neverland as this, like, just fantasy place,
Yeah.
which it is.
I
That
wanna
has
go.
kind of a happy tone that you would want to go. You
Yeah.
want to go see mermaids. You want to go see, all these adventures. Maybe not so much the pirates, but even them, they're not that scary.
No.
So
No, not in the movie.
right, but in the book,
Yeah.
this is a place of adventure, but I wouldn't categorize it as a necessarily joyous, happy adventure. It's just adventure.
Well, it's also not like a childish adventure. It is
No.
it is a adventure in the real sense of what that word originally meant,
Yes.
which is a perilous journey
Yes.
with reward that has reward and merit.
Yes.
but
But also suffering.
right, but is a perilous journey.
Yes.
The haunting thing about this is that this perilous journey is perpetually being taken on by children.
Yes.
And chief among them is the most childish of them all. And there's something really unsettling about that fact, about the fact
Yes.
that these are kids.
Peter does not want to allow anyone to grow up. And the way they alluded to the fact that he just got rid of a lost boy, and by got rid of, I'm pretty sure he just killed them when they started to grow. And so,
Yeah, because they're all scared of not fitting in their trees. Because if you don't fit in
Yes.
your tree,
but there was even a
TikTok.
part of the story that said something about he would be rid of them if
Oh,
they started
yeah.
to grow.
Well, they're definitely all the Lost Boys are distinctly scared of him all the time. I mean,
Sure.
because they're like
They'll follow whatever
yeah,
he says.
if he plays if he's playing something, they're playing that too, and it's
Right.
real to them. They act like it's real,
Absolutely.
and like you can even see that in where they're like sometimes they don't have food.
yes.
And they pretend like they're
They
eating,
pretend.
and they really pretend like they're eating.
Yes.
Because if they don't, and they show Peter that it's not real.
Here it is. It says, when they seem to be growing up, which is against the rules, Peter thins them out.
Yeah.
And they're counting numbers, but at this time there were 6 of them. So he thins them out means not, he makes
Yeah,
them
he
get
definitely
skinny.
takes the kids
It
out.
means
Yeah.
he gets rid of them. He kills them.
Yeah. What's not fitting with his narrative? It's not fitting with.
No, he wants the place to remain.
Right.
The Lost Boys need to be the only people that are allowed to be grown up in Neverland are the pirates and the natives.
Yeah. I mean, the book calls them Redskins, and it still says that, but I don't think we're allowed to say that anymore.
No.
So
We're going to call them natives.
we're gonna call them natives.
Yes.
'Cause, maybe they're native to the Neverland. I don't know.
Right. Yes.
Even the movie's a little. The movie's pretty rough with portraying
Oh, yeah,
portraying
definitely.
Native Americans.
Yeah, Native Americans
When
are
they're
not.
in the-
Anyway,
Yeah.
yeah, so
Moving
they're
on.
they're allowed to be adults. Basically, anyone who is an enemy is allowed to be an adult. Anyone who is not an enemy must be a child. So even the fairies, I get the feeling that the fairies are not adults. Am I right? Am I wrong?
Yeah.
Like Tinkerbell does not feel like an adult fairy to
No,
me because
not
they die.
really.
They don't age. Remember, they
But kind of.
die quickly. They don't live long.
But wouldn't that mean that, like, they are most of the time? So if you met a fairy in the wild, you're more likely to meet an adult fairy than you are a child fairy.
I don't think there are adult fairies. I think they're all child fairies and they die. I don't think they get out of childhood.
I don't know.
I think that's part of the story. That's why Peter can be friends with them. That's why Peter can be on.
I thought you could be friends with them because they die quick. By the way, just from a story perspective, that was kind of tragic to me at the end where they're like, Tinkerbell's dead because fairies die really quick. And
Do
I'm
you
like,
love Tinkerbell? Is that why? What's
No.
going on with Tinkerbell?
I gotta make this weird. I just no.
Do you have feelings for Tinkerbell?
I have no feelings for Tinkerbell. Tinkerbell is the kind of person I want to avoid in life.
She's a fairy, so
Yeah.
I would hope you'd want to avoid fairies.
There's no way to win this, huh?
No.
But I don't know that Tinkerbell's portrayed as a child, is what I'm saying. She's, like, catty, but
She's obviously attracted to Peter. Why would she be attracted to Peter if she was an adult?
she's a fairy. How do we know what fairy rules are?
Okay, that's weird.
She's already tiny. What do you, I mean, like, how do we know what fairy attractiveness rules are?
I think we should just change the subject
On
right now.
top of the fact that we don't know what fairy attractiveness rules are,
Uh-huh.
the only line that we have from her for such a long time is "you silly ass." That's all we
Right.
know.
That's true. She says that repeatedly.
All the time. That's
Yeah.
all she says.
Yes.
We finally get to learn more, and she doesn't, I guess, say it. She like tinks it or whatever, like whatever her language is.
In fairy language.
Yeah, that only people can
Fairies,
understand.
if you will.
Convenient. How do we get on how old
I don't know.
Tinkerbell is?
But because what we were saying is that Peter, the only people who were allowed to be adults are the people who are the enemies and
Yeah.
not the friends. Like
Yeah.
the people that he chooses to look like they're on his side
Right.
cannot be adults.
No.
Which is my argument for why fairies are not adults.
And so I'm fine to secede that battle. I don't know that they have to be children. I don't know what the line is. Like, when is a housefly an adult housefly versus a child housefly? Most of its life, it's an adult housefly. If we're looking at human lifespans, right? If I live to 80 years, most of that is I'm an adult human. And so if a fairy lives to like 80 minutes, most of that is adult fairy. And then a little bit at the beginning, like 20 minutes at the beginning, is child
I think
fairy.
that's breaking a cardinal rule of this particular story. Because I don't believe that Peter sees any adult as a good thing or someone he can be friends with.
Sure.
You're breaking a cardinal rule of this story.
I don't know. I mean, the natives
Till
are
the
definitely
end.
adults. And
Yes.
we ally with them. It's not like they're getting in the underground house or anything, but we're definitely allied with them.
But not not at first.
Not at first, but like after he saves Tiger Lily, who, I mean, I don't know. I guess we can assume Tiger Lily's a child. I would assume
Well,
Tiger
she was
Lily's a
the
child.
king's daughter. What do you think?
She's like the
Princess of the.
Yeah,
What do you call the head of the tribe?
the chief.
Yeah, that's what I was looking
Yeah.
for. That word, chief's daughter.
They did name the tribe, but I don't think it's a real name.
I have no idea.
I think they
did
call
not
it the
look into that.
Pickaninny tribe. Like
Pickaninny, yes.
And that might also be a little racist, and I don't know about that, so yeah.
Right.
It doesn't seem like a real name. It seems like a joke name.
Yeah, well, it's a story, so.
Yeah. We're talking about Peter Pan.
Peter Pan.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that he.
I agree with you that he doesn't view. he always views adults in a negative light. If there's
Yes.
a way to view them negatively, that's the way he views them.
Absolutely. So I think that's his main thing. But mostly mothers. He hates mothers.
I mean,
Oh, he hates them.
he does hate mothers, but my question is, why does he bring Wendy back? Why does he want Wendy to be specifically
I
the
think
mother of
because
the Lost Boys?
The Lost Boys were searching for, wanting a mother.
Oh, so you're saying this is for them?
He's
is not
doing
for
it
him at all.
for the Lost Boys, not for
maybe.
himself.
You might be right.
Yeah.
Because he goes back and he doesn't need that. But he's still. But even at the end, he wants Wendy to come with him. Even after he drops all the Lost Boys off.
Right, because by that point he had formed a bond with her.
I guess.
Yeah, he had definitely formed a bond with Wendy.
Yeah, and I guess in these interactions, he always plays the father, not a child.
Correct, but even in playing the father, he struggled with that and said something about, I'm not really your husband, I'm not really the father.
Yeah, you're not really our mother. Yeah.
You're not really our mother. So
Right.
even in that, he wanted to make sure that everyone understood this was just make-believe.
Yeah. Oh, I'm not saying he is not. He's a big mother fan. Clearly he is not. I don't know
Yeah.
what happened to him in his life, but he is not a big mom fan.
Oh, well, that goes back to the
All right, we're getting
author.
to it later.
Yeah, but it says, but of course he cared very much, and he was so full of wrath against grown-ups,
Yeah.
who as usual were spoiling everything.
Yeah. Well, they do have a tendency.
He has wrath against grown-ups, and then it specifically says against mothers later in the book somewhere.
I'll admit that when I was a kid, I did think the grown-ups had a tendency to spoil everything.
Well, every child does, because grown-ups tell you no,
Right.
right?
Correct.
So when you want to do something impulsive and childlike, the responsible party of the parent is saying, that's not a good idea.
That's fair. Upsetting, but true. Yeah. Peter is scary. But really interesting if you've, I almost think it's weird what they did in the movie. I understand why they did it the way they did it, but, they really make Peter the hero. Peter is a good guy.
Right.
In that movie, and I don't labor under any assumptions that Peter is even a decent person in this book.
Right.
Like,
Peter doesn't know who he is. I find this very interesting. When he was facing, I believe it was when he was facing Hook, he says, Pan, who and what art thou? And Peter replies, I'm youth, I'm joy. I'm a little bird that has broken out of the egg. This, of course, was nonsense, but it was proof to the unhappy Hook that Peter did not know in the least who or what he was.
right. And
Which is the pinnacle of good form.
Yeah, because this plays that into the fact that that's the thing to not, to be aloof is to have good form. Yeah.
So I find it interesting that Peter doesn't really know who or what he is, and he doesn't stop long enough to think about it. It reminds me of my 2-year-old grandson, who just keeps going and going and going and going and doesn't really stop long enough. But then once in a while he does stop and think something through. Peter never stops to think anything through. It's always this impulsive reaction
Right.
on, and even the way at the end he was ticking as he's climbing the boat. He doesn't even realize he's ticking. He doesn't even realize that
Yeah,
this
that
was
was
a great plan
Yeah.
until, oh, wait, this is, something dawns on him. He didn't think any of that through. He's
No.
just climbing the boat.
Yeah, that was really interesting. That was they almost do. They do this you end the chapter seeing the Lost Boys looking down and they see him. He's the one ticking, and you're like, Peter's a genius. And
Right.
then the very next chapter, it's like, yeah, Peter had no idea what he was doing.
He had no clue. But then he was like, oh, that was pretty smart of me.
Right, he was like, wow, I am a genius.
Yeah.
And of course, always willing to take that credit when bestowed
Sure.
upon him.
I think he's just
because as it says
doesn't know.
as the book says several times, Peter Pan, there was never a boy as cocky as Peter Pan.
and that's what drove Hook crazy.
Right.
Yeah, I think he just doesn't even stop long enough to think about who he is.
Which isn't. There might be something interesting there in this idea of he is somehow, while not knowing himself at all, able to be cocky. He is able to be overconfident, despite not having any grounding in himself at all. Which is weird because normally we think like you have a high view of yourself. You at least usually you have too high a view of yourself. This is what leads to cockiness. This is what leads to overestimating your own abilities. But Peter has no grounding in himself at all. Not that he's unconfident in his ability, but simply that he just has no basis for that confidence at all, which is different than us usually when we're overconfident, where we seem to think we have a basis for that. And that's why we're overconfident.
I really think, though, that he's just going through Neverland 100% based on what he feels in the moment. And so I don't think he's thought about himself long enough to... I think he just feels confident, and that's what he's bringing off. You know what I mean? He just... Like, I don't think he's thought about himself long enough to think, should I be confident? Shouldn't I be? Why wouldn't you be confident if you've never wondered, should I not be confident? Is there anything I shouldn't be confident about?
You're right, because you haven't stopped to examine yourself at all. So, yeah.
Right. So you would be confident because...
As long as you feel yeah.
As long as you're feeling that,
Because
you
you've
know.
not examined yourself at all.
And there's other times where he feels so emotionally distraught, he just sits down and cries over his shadow.
Yeah.
So he wasn't confident in that moment. He lost his shadow. He didn't know what to do. You know what I mean? So it's all about...
immediately he regains that. Like, as
Oh,
soon as it's
absolutely.
so back on, he's like, I never cry. He says something in that
Right.
same chapter. He's like, I've never cried. Like,
Right.
when we just saw him do it,
Yeah.
and, like, Wendy kind of brushes it off and doesn't, like, point it out.
Right.
Yeah.
I think he's just all about whatever he is feeling in the moment.
Right.
And then he does whatever... initially, just whatever first comes to his head, he does. He just reminds me of just a very impulsive child.
That's true.
You know, and he never wants to grow up. He refuses to grow up. I would say the only strong, consistent feeling that Peter Pan has is his hatred of grown-ups.
He doesn't like him. That's
So
for sure.
I think that is the only strong feeling that is consistent. I would
doesn't
argue
change.
Captain Hook is part of that. And that is why he is hyper-focused on Captain Hook at the end, where he keeps repeating to himself, it will be me or Hook. You know, or whatever
Yeah.
he says, that I can't remember the exact words, but
Hook or me this time.
Hook or me this time. So it's almost like...
It's a finality thing.
Yeah, to him, Hook is, he's basically the epitome of all things that he hates about adults,
Right.
and he must be rid of him.
Right.
That is the only strong feeling I feel that he has throughout the book. Like the consistent, sticks with you strong feeling. Other feelings, like him being sad about the, shadow,
Right.
him feeling certain way about Wendy or Tinkerbell or whoever, those feelings come and go,
Right.
and they change like the wind.
Yeah, they're very quick.
But the thing that does not ever change for him is his hatred of grown-ups, and Hook is part of that.
Yeah.
Hook is the embodiment of that
Sure.
for him.
That's the fight he has on Neverland. In
Yes.
his world, that's his enemy.
Yes. That is Peter Pan's core right there.
Yeah.
His hatred of adults.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is, again, another reason why I'm going to argue that Wendy is at minimum a dual main character. If not the actual person we're supposed to be following. Like, she is the better answer than any other character in the book.
She is the answer of hope that the author
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
wrote the book for, I would argue.
Yeah, you're supposed to, at the end, you're supposed to be like, this is a good response. I think you're supposed to feel good about the end. I love, yeah. One of the things I liked about when in the chapter they flew away is every once in a while the authors seem to write to you, write to the reader.
Yes.
Which I actually really liked.
Yeah.
Where one of them is that when they fly off and he goes, "This story may be dreadful, but I promise you it will come around in the end."
Yes. Yeah, I do like how he did switch that.
And there's something about that was really interesting to me and comforting when he did that. But we're talking more about the medium. But that's, but I think that this is that when Jane flies off, the grown up Wendy and her decisions towards Jane and stuff. That's what he's talking about. This is the good ending. And obviously when they return and the boys grow up and this is a good end. That's what he's talking about with this good ending. Which is why I think that Wendy's answer is correct and Peter's answer is not correct.
What do you mean by that?
Peter staying in the Neverland is the wrong answer.
Oh, yeah. Well, he doesn't have a choice.
It doesn't seem like it.
Yeah, he does not have a choice. No, he can't. He can't. It would go against his core to come and be like one of the Lost Boys and fall in line under the authority of adults.
Yeah.
It goes against his core. He can't do it.
Sure. Yeah, I agree that he won't.
He can't.
I don't know that he can't.
He can't.
I agree that he won't. I agree
it
that
won't
he
last.
Would never.
If he tried, it wouldn't last.
But what is different? Why is Peter not grown up? Is Peter not human? Is Peter something else? Because if he's human, because if he's human, then I would argue that he won't do it because of his convictions, but because of who he is. He won't ever do it, but he could. If he's not human and he is somehow affixed to the Neverland, which is a decent theory, then sure, he couldn't. He wouldn't be able to leave for an extended period of time like that. Because
yes,
he does not exist.
Well,
then
in the
outside
beginning,
of Neverland.
We learned that Neverland is simply your imagination.
Is it the imagination or is it specifically dreams? Because it feels like all kids go there in their dreams.
Well, I think it's your imagination because I think there was a reference. I don't know where it is.
I know what you're talking in the beginning, right? Yeah. It's where Mrs. Darling is familiar with Peter, like she's seen him before. It's not yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you that Peter seems to stand outside of at minimum time, but yeah.
Because each child in the beginning has a different Neverland, a different version of Neverland and what they've seen in Neverland.
Sure, yeah.
So Neverland is a figment of your imagination. It is part of your imagination, and which is why the mom has, why Mrs. Darling has familiarity with it on a very base level,
Sure.
Yeah. I love how they say Neverlands have a family resemblance.
That is kind of interesting. It does seem like the Neverland we end up with is the combined Neverland of John, Michael, and Wendy.
Yes.
All the things that they want are here.
We too have been there.
Right.
That's what it says. Yeah. I think that's... Yeah. So Peter is attached to Neverland.
Yeah.
It's not... He can't leave Neverland. It's an imaginary place.
Sure.
And because... And this is why it goes on generationally. Because Neverlands have a family resemblance, Peter is in the family Neverlands. So,
what you're arguing here... but you're arguing that then Peter is not real. Peter is simply imaginary.
Yes.
And this whole thing was simply an imaginary quest. Here's my problem. Papa is still in a kennel.
No. I think
that
in this story, Neverland, which was an imaginary place,
Yeah.
came to be. And it continued on.
Well, then Peter then is a thing that
But
exists.
also attached to Neverland.
Okay.
If Neverland, if
Why
Peter
are
doesn't,
the Lost Boys real? Why did they grow up and have like business jobs? Like, this is ridiculous.
Peter
One of
could
them was
have
dressed
done
like
that
a
maybe,
bear.
but
Why?
I feel like if Peter leaves, the Lost Boys can leave Neverland and Neverland can still exist. But if Peter
They
leaves,
clearly grow. I'm worried
Yeah.
that they've been stolen from their families as well. But
that's a whole other thing. If Peter were to leave Neverland, Neverland would cease to exist.
okay, I don't know about that claim. That seems bold.
Because Peter is the thing generationally that was the same in this family
Sure.
resemblance of Neverlands.
Sure, yeah, like the Darlings, yeah.
So if Peter comes out of that, the future Neverlands of this family no longer have a family resemblance. What is the family resemblance then?
Well, it just wouldn't be Peter. It just like he wouldn't be there. He
It would be
real.
somebody else?
He'd be like Uncle Pete. That's like
Uncle Pete that flies.
works in the iron mill. No, because he can't. No, because he can't fly. Because he's gonna grow up.
Well, because the Lost Boys could fly, they had to tie him down to bedposts.
Which is hilarious.
Yeah, until they started forgetting,
Right,
and then they lost their ability to fly.
right, and they couldn't fly anymore.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
but
mean, I agree
Wendy
with you,
never forgot.
but she couldn't fly.
No, she never forgot.
So she forgot how to fly.
Did it say she forgot how to fly, or did she just choose not to
I
fly?
don't know. You have the book in your hand. She didn't just choose not to fly. She didn't know how to fly as an adult. She said to Jane that she couldn't fly anymore.
So why did she forget to fly? She said she couldn't fly because she didn't have fairy dust anymore.
I don't know about that. But then even when she's talking to Jane, she alludes to the fact that Peter could have been fake, that it could have been made up. Because they all start to think that this might have been fake. This might have not been real.
I would argue she knew he was coming back.
I think that I agree with you that I think she knew he was coming back. I disagree with you that I think if he didn't come back... I'm trying to explain this.
I would also argue that Mrs. Darling went on this same adventure and completely
Boo.
forgot.
Boo! I don't like that at all. I don't think that's true. I
think
knew you were
that's
going
how
to say
she
it.
recognized Peter Pan.
I believe that Mrs. Darling has met Peter. I
Yes.
do not believe that Mrs. Darling has gone on this adventure. Here's why.
Not this particular adventure, but I think that she has been on an adventure as a child with Peter Pan.
Why? We see Peter have a vitriolic response to her at the end. And my question is, if he knew her, why?
But did he not also not recognize Wendy right
He
away?
didn't recognize Wendy. No, I guess he did get mad. He got mad she
Yeah.
was a grown up then.
Yeah, so it could be just this
And he
kind
forgets immediately.
He also hates adults.
I still don't think that Mrs. Darling went on this quest.
I don't think she went on this particular quest, but I think she went on an adventure of some sort with Peter Pan.
I think, like all kids who've seen the Neverland, as it says in the beginning, that Mrs. Darling too has seen the Neverland. And if they have a family resemblance, then Mrs. Darling too has met Peter. But met Peter in her dreams, in imagination, not when
Okay.
he actually comes in the window.
We don't know.
Though she did steal
Yeah.
his shadow. But that was the first time that it became that Peter was real to her. And also, how did she steal his shadow? There's a lot of questions there, right? I mean, yeah. It's possible, I guess.
It's a story.
Yeah, I don't know. It's possible. It's also possible that, like, Peter's got, all kinds of problems. But I think there's something... This hatred specifically of mothers
Oh, absolutely.
is the whole time I was waiting to learn something about Peter's mother. And we never did. We never learned anything like overt about Peter's mother. And if Peter really is just a fiction of Neverland, then it's not necessary that he has a mother. Though the book made me feel as if he did, and that then he was abandoned.
And that's what the author wanted you to feel.
Right, and I think that's true. Yeah, I think that's true, and we can get into that later too. Is it before we totally move on from characters and you know?
Yeah.
Is there any other character that you need to talk about that you really want to talk about?
Who is the sea cook?
The sea cook?
Mm-hmm.
Can you give me a little bit?
Some of the greatest heroes have confessed that just before they fell too, they had a sinking. Had it been so with Peter at that moment, I would admit it. After all, he was the only man that the sea cook had feared. Who is this sea cook? He was mentioned a number of times.
I don't even remember. Can you, like, sea cook, like ocean chef? Like, that's how it's spelled?
It's SEA-COOK, sea cook. I feel like he is a pirate of some sort, but it just keeps, like, a couple of times it mentioned this sea cook and how he was afraid of Peter.
It's not the bird, is it?
No, I thought the bird was something else.
Yeah, but I thought the bird was something else too.
I don't know.
Sea cook.
Yeah, I just thought maybe you would know who the sea cook was. I will just have to look into that another time, perhaps.
No, yeah, I have no idea.
Yeah. So no, I don't think that there's any other character that's that particularly interesting to me.
I'm gonna give my second favorite character an honorable mention.
Who's
that? Toodles, the Lost Boy. I just really like Toodles.
Why do you like Toodles?
Just because he's so dumb. He's just so, and he's so nice and dumb. He's like my favorite kind of dumb kid. He shoots Wendy. Our introduction to him is he shoots Wendy because Tink tricks him into doing it.
Right.
And then immediately he's like, "Oh no!" He was so willing to murder this girl.
Right.
And then all of a sudden he's like, "Oh shoot, we were," and he's so proud too.
Yeah.
He brings Peter over. He's like, "Look, I did it! I killed this flying girl." And Peter's like, I just like Toodles. And he's always the first, when someone has to take the blame too, when someone has to take a fall, he's always the one that steps up, every time.
Wasn't he Wendy's favorite too?
Yeah, I think he was. He always steps up. And even when they're like, Mr. Banks is feeling like a little upset about not being asked, he's the first one that goes over there and is presents himself in the most regal fashion he can. And I was just like, I don't know, I just like him. I don't have a lot to say about him. I just liked him. I liked reading his scenes.
Good for Toodles.
Good for Toodles. I like that he made it out, you know? We've talked a lot about the Neverland. We've talked a lot about the world. Do you have anything else to say about the world?
Neverland?
Yeah. I
like how it says it was looking for them. Neverland was looking for them.
There is a huge, theme, especially in the beginning. I felt eerie about how, instead of these kids going into this world, it felt like this world was grabbing them.
Yeah.
And pulling
it says it was looking for them.
Yeah. And how even the stars guided Peter to where he needed to go.
Mm-hmm. That's the other thing, the travel to Neverland. I mean, Disney made that seem so fun. Look, we're flying through the air. We're flying past Big Ben. We're flying, in this fun way. And then you read it in the book and it's like, wow, that was a lot.
Yeah, that was tough.
They're trying to stay awake, and almost
don't they
dying.
Stay together?
Well, Peter kept leaving them. And that, of course,
in the movie, don't they
Yeah.
They all land together, right?
Oh,
the cannons get fired at them
Well, no, when they get closer to Neverland, the cannons are firing, then he tells Tinkerbell to lead them in the movie to the Lost Boys.
But
And that's where she tries to get them shot down and everything.
Yeah, I
But so
remember
that's
that.
the same. But
John and Michael are with her,
oh yeah.
or with Wendy, and they're not, and they've landed somewhere else.
Right. I love how Wendy's not even concerned about that at
No.
first. Like,
Not at all.
that's kind of funny. But
There is a hint, or a notion that I wonder if they all are convinced entirely that this is real, and it's not a dream, some kind of like waking dream thing. At first, at least, they
Yeah.
spend now like I don't know how much time, but I would argue maybe like several months, like at this in the Neverland, and so at some point you're gonna think, I'm not dreaming for this long, but
right. Yeah, and maybe at first they didn't think it was real. I don't know. It didn't really say
and
that.
so I'm just saying, like, I'm wondering if that's why maybe Wendy's not
I
as
don't know.
concerned, is because she's like, well, this is kind of like a dream thing anyway.
Right, I'm going to wake up at any minute.
Right.
Yeah, Neverland seemed to be pulling them. And again, Neverland, I feel it was clear Neverland is in imagination. It has a family resemblance, so it's obviously not a real place.
Sure. Rip. Although
But
not really.
that I do believe came to be in the story,
Sure, yeah.
It's a creepy place. It's like part creepy, but very interesting. Not in a, I want to go there. Like, I don't mind reading about it, but I don't think I would want to actually go there.
No, I
Because, quite frankly, I wouldn't last a day.
I'm gonna be honest, I don't do well with camping.
Yeah. And I want to live in a tree.
Yeah, I'm very against that.
I don't want to do that, okay? And I don't
I don't
want to
really
be
like-
chased by natives.
Yeah.
I also,
I don't want to live in a teepee or
no.
a pirate ship. Both
Yeah.
not very clean.
Yeah. I'm just not, it's not a place, yeah. It's not like we're going to Disney World here, people.
No.
You're going somewhere that's dangerous and definitely adventurous, but like you said, adventure in the real sense of the word.
Yeah. There's peril. There's real
There's
peril.
peril.
here.
Absolutely. So Neverland is an interesting place.
Yeah. Yeah, I like it as a setting for this book. I like it a lot because of how creepy it is. And I think it does what it needs to do to communicate the themes of the story very well. That being said, I'll quickly, because we're moving on time. I will quickly say that we'll go to plot. Like,
Okay, let's
just
go to plot.
some of the things that I wanted to highlight. We've highlighted a lot of these already by asking about characters and stuff. We've done a lot of these, but so we don't have to spend a whole lot of time here. I want to highlight two moments that I really liked, and they're both with Peter, because I find that the moments where Peter is alone and we see him are some of my favorite moments in the whole book. I really like the walk up, the trek to the pirate ship where we're just with him, where he chants the whole time, "Hooker me" this time. Like, there is something, I don't know, in me, there's something that I'm so with him. And I, like, for a moment, it's like, I would also be a lost boy. That's the thing. Like, if I found myself here, I would follow Peter too. There's no, like, there's something about that, like, intensity that is, like, drawing to me. Like, that I'm like, that's really cool. And the other one is where his interactions with that bird while the water is going up, and this weird little, like, 3-page chapter where, like, he, like, finds, like, the bird, like, saves his life.
Yeah.
And, like, he gets into the net, like, the bird sacrificially, like, gives up this nest with its eggs in it. And then he, like, takes the pirate hat and puts it down, and that ends up actually working out great for the bird.
For the eggs.
Yeah.
Saves the eggs.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, like, this, like, he is not selfless in this book ever. maybe except for there. But it's like, and he's not like totally selfless, right? He was saved first, but there is this like he did go out of his way to then help this bird, and this weird like interaction, this like quiet little like saving of each other was really interesting to me, and it made me like Peter, whereas most of the time I was scared of Peter.
Because you just don't know what he's going to do.
Right.
But again, I would argue that was the feeling he had in the moment.
Oh, sure.
This bird saved me.
Yeah.
I should do something nice for it.
Yeah.
I don't think he put a whole lot of thought into that.
No, I don't think he did either.
Oh, look, there's a hat. I'll stick its eggs in the hat.
Yeah, I don't think he did either. But even then, before then, he saved, like, he ended up on the rock because he saved Wendy instead of himself.
Well, that was Wendy.
Yeah. Well, why is that special? I don't know. I just thought those moments were interesting. My favorite moment in the whole book is where Hook dies. He is my favorite character, and his death is, I think, the best scene in his end. So, the whole, it's just the push to get Peter to crack, and the almost like uselessness of that goal that we know is useless, that seems so needed for Hook. But we know Peter would quickly give up any kind of good form he has. Like, that's not a thing he cares about. But that Hook is not, refuses to die before seeing. It's a really interesting end for a character who was really interesting while he was alive.
Yeah.
I don't know if you had any other story moments that you like wanted to highlight, and which moment in the story was your favorite, I would ask.
Well, I really enjoy it, but it could be that's kind of the, the point, or not the point, but the pinnacle of the whole book is this throwdown with Captain Hook.
Oh, it's definitely the climax.
So
the
climax. That's the
story.
word I was looking for. Yeah. So I too enjoy that because you're fully in it. You're like, oh, what's going on? And then Peter's in, the Captain Hook's cabin, and he's making the crowing sound, and so just the terrified Captain Hook, like he goes from tie them up and ties Wendy onto the mast, and then all of a sudden he hears the ticking, and he becomes this like, I don't know, just the transformation of him back and forth like that, and then the whole good form thing. It just definitely draws you in. That is probably my favorite scene, but I also really enjoyed the fact that Mr. Darling got in the kennel and that became like a thing, like he became so well known.
Yeah, that the news comes out and like
Kennel
the taxi
Man
guy shows up at his house every day.
Yeah, and he becomes famous for this.
Yeah.
Right, he becomes famous for this. So that was very intriguing to me. Like, I didn't see that coming.
Yeah, no.
But again, that's about the transformation for me. I love when a character completely transforms like that.
Yeah.
And so
that's
to me,
definitely a 180.
He was the most transformed in the entire book.
For sure.
And so that's why that part of the book is really interesting to me.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, it's strange. That's for sure.
It's really weird. I didn't see it coming, and it was really weird, and I completely forgot about it because I read this book a long time ago. So, why I would forget about that? Because it was just so interesting to me. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that'll conclude episode 1. That'll conclude our talk about the story. I think it was good. We covered a lot of things.
That was so fun.
It was so fun.
So fun.
So we will hopefully sometime this month also be putting out the second episode where we'll talk about the kind of the background of the story, our backgrounds with the story, and all of that, as well as the morals, the meaning maybe that we found behind this story. We will talk about all of that in episode 2. But until then, thanks so much for watching this video or listening to this podcast, however you take it in. Please, if you like this podcast, subscribe to the YouTube channel or the Apple Podcast. However you found this, subscribe to that. Like, comment, and all of those good things. And until next time, savor your